It was supposed to be just another Saturday evening in the quiet little town of Milford. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and gold. The streets were calm. Only the sound of birds returning to their nests filled the air. In a small house on Oak Street, a young man named Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone. His hands were trembling, and his heart pounded so loud he could almost hear it in his ears. A text message was open on his screen. It was from Emily, his girlfriend, for almost 2 years. "We need to talk. I'm serious, Ethan." Ethan read those words again and again. Something about the way she wrote it made his stomach twist. Emily wasn't the type to be overly dramatic. She only said we need to talk when it was something serious, very serious. He had met Emily in their senior year of high school. She was the kind of girl who could light up a whole room without trying. Her soft blonde hair, her green eyes, and that little dimple on her right cheek, when she smiled, Ethan used to think she was the most beautiful person he had ever seen. And she wasn't just pretty, she was kind. She would volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends and always bought food for the old man who sat outside the grocery store. They had started dating during the school's spring carnival. Ethan remembered how nervous he had been when he asked her to be his girlfriend, his voice shaking, his palms sweaty. But she had smiled and said yes without hesitation. Since then, they had spent almost every day together studying, hanging out, and dreaming about the future. Now, a year after graduating, things were different. They weren't kids anymore. Ethan worked at his uncle's auto shop, trying to save money for college, while Emily worked part-time at the local cafe. Life wasn't perfect, but they were happy, or at least Ethan thought they were. The message kept burning in his mind. He typed back, "What's wrong?" The reply came fast, "Can you come over now?" Ethan didn't even bother to change his clothes. He grabbed his car keys and headed out. The evening air was cool, and the streets were already darkening. His old truck rattled as he drove through Milford, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Emily lived in a small white house at the edge of town with her parents. The porch light was on, casting a soft glow on the front yard. When Ethan pulled up, Emily was already waiting outside, her arms crossed. She wasn't smiling. He stepped out of the truck and tried to sound casual. "Hey, what's going on?" Emily didn't answer right away. She looked at him with eyes that seemed heavy, like she had been holding something in for too long. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "I'm late." Ethan frowned. "Late? Late for what?" She took a deep breath. "My period. I'm 3 weeks late." It was as if the world suddenly went silent. The only thing Ethan could hear was the wind rustling through the trees. His mouth went dry. You think you might be," he couldn't finish the sentence. Emily nodded, her eyes glistening. "I took a test this morning." She reached into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out a small white stick wrapped in tissue. She handed it to him. The word "pregnant" was printed clearly in the little window. Ethan's stomach dropped. His hands shook as he stared at it, and 1,000 thoughts rushed into his mind. This couldn't be real. This was the kind of thing that happened to other people, not to him. He was only 19. He had plans: college, a career, maybe moving to the city. A baby was never part of the plan. Emily's voice broke the silence. "Ethan, I'm scared." He looked up at her, seeing the fear in her face. She wasn't angry. She wasn't blaming him. She was just scared, just like he was. "Are you sure?" he asked weakly. "I took it twice," she said. Both times it was the same. Ethan felt his chest tighten. His mind was spinning, but he forced himself to speak. "Well, we'll figure something out." Emily gave him a small, sad smile. "I hope so." They sat on the porch steps, both staring at the ground. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Ethan kept thinking about how quickly life could change. Just a few days ago, he was worried about saving enough money to fix his truck's brakes. Now he was thinking about diapers, cribs, and how he was going to explain this to his parents. "Do your parents know?" he finally asked. Emily shook her head. "Not yet. I don't even know how to tell them. My mom's going to cry, and my dad, he's going to be furious." Ethan swallowed hard. He had met her father before. Mr. Carter was a tall man with a serious face, the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to make you feel small. The idea of facing him with this news made Ethan's hands sweat. As the night grew colder, Ethan promised Emily he would be there for her, no matter what. But as he drove home, his mind was filled with fear. He didn't know if he was ready for this. He didn't know if he could handle the responsibility. That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his thoughts dark and restless. The words kept echoing in his head. I'm pregnant. The next few days felt like a blur. Ethan went to work, but he couldn't focus. He avoided his friends because he didn't want anyone to notice something was wrong. At night, he would sit alone in his room, thinking about what his life would be like in a year. The more he thought about it, the more trapped he felt. One evening, Emily called him again. Her voice was shaky. Ethan, I told my parents. His heart skipped a beat. What did they say? They're angry, she whispered. My dad wants to talk to you. Tomorrow. Ethan's hands began to sweat. He could already picture Mr. Carter's cold stare. He knew that conversation wouldn't be easy. He told Emily he would be there, but after the call ended, he sat in silence, feeling a wave of panic rise inside him. That night, he couldn't sleep. He thought about the disappointment in his own parents' faces if they found out. He thought about the future he had dreamed of, slowly slipping away. And then a dangerous thought entered his mind, a thought he didn't want to admit even to himself. What if he just left? The idea sat in his head like a shadow, whispering to him. If he left, he wouldn't have to face Mr. Carter. He wouldn't have to explain to his own parents. He wouldn't have to give up his dreams. He could just disappear. Ethan told himself he was just thinking out loud, but deep inside, he knew the thought was growing stronger. The more he imagined it, the more real it became. The next morning, as the sun rose over Milford, Ethan stood in front of his mirror, looking at his own reflection. His face was pale, his eyes tired. He didn't recognize himself anymore. And in that moment, he felt like the walls of his life were closing in. The knock from reality was coming. Mr. Carter was expecting him that evening. But Ethan's mind was already drifting elsewhere, to the idea of getting in his truck, driving away, and never looking back. He didn't know it yet, but the choice he would make in the next 24 hours would change everything for him, for Emily, and for the life growing inside her. Ethan woke up to the sound of rain tapping against his window. The sky outside was gray, heavy with clouds, as if the whole town knew this was going to be a bad day. His stomach churned at the thought of facing Emily's father. He stayed in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling. The same thoughts from last night kept replaying in his mind. What if he didn't go? What if he just left? It sounded selfish, but the fear inside him was bigger than anything else. By mid-morning, his mom called from the kitchen. Ethan, you're going to be late for work. He sat up, rubbed his face, and shouted back, I'm not going in today. His mom's footsteps came toward his room. She opened the door slightly, her eyebrows knitting together. Are you sick? I'm not feeling up to it, he mumbled, avoiding her eyes. She looked at him for a moment, like she knew there was something more, but she didn't push. All right, but don't stay in bed all day. When she left, Ethan sat there in silence, his mind racing. At noon, Emily texted him. My dad says 6 p.m. Don't be late. Just reading it made his chest tighten. He could almost see Mr. Carter sitting at the kitchen table, his jaw set, his voice cold. Ethan imagined the man blaming him for everything, yelling at him, maybe even telling him to stay away from Emily forever. The hours dragged on. Ethan tried to distract himself by fixing the loose handle on his dresser and organizing his desk, but every time he glanced at the clock, he felt the weight of the meeting pressing down on him. At 4 p.m., he sat on his bed, staring at his phone. The idea of running away crept back into his mind. He pictured himself driving out of Milford, passing the town limit sign, and just never coming back. No angry parents. No sleepless nights. No crying baby. But then he thought of Emily. Her green eyes. The way she held his hand when she was nervous. The way she had looked at him the night she told him about the pregnancy, scared but still hoping he would be her anchor. Could he really leave her alone in this? He got up, paced the room, sat back down. He felt trapped in a loop of indecision. By 5:30, the rain had stopped, leaving the air damp and cool. Ethan grabbed his truck keys, telling himself he'd drive to Emily's house like he promised. He started the engine, the familiar rumble filling his ears. But as he reached the main road, his hands began to sweat on the steering wheel. His chest felt tight, and every part of him screamed not to go. He pulled over, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. In that moment, a strange calmness washed over him. The decision was made. He wasn't going to face Mr. Carter. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. Ethan turned the truck around and headed in the opposite direction out of town. The road stretched ahead, empty except for the occasional car passing by. The further he drove, the lighter he felt, but also the more guilty. He tried to silence the voice in his head that kept saying, "You're leaving her. You're leaving your baby." After half an hour, he stopped at a gas station on the edge of a neighboring town. He sat there for a while, the bright fluorescent lights buzzing above him. He didn't have much money, just what he'd saved from the auto shop, but he figured he could make it last a while if he was careful. His phone buzzed. It was a call from Emily. He stared at the screen but didn't answer. A minute later, a text came through. "Ethan, where are you? My dad's waiting." He put the phone face down on the passenger seat and turned the engine back on. He didn't want to hear her voice right now. He didn't want to explain. As the night deepened, Ethan drove until he found a cheap roadside motel. The sign flickered, and the parking lot was nearly empty. Inside, the room smelled faintly of bleach, and the thin curtains did little to block the light from the neon sign outside. Lying on the bed, he stared at the cracked ceiling, his thoughts a tangled mess. He told himself this was just temporary, that he needed space to think. But deep down, he knew he had crossed a line. He had chosen the road over responsibility. Back in Milford, Emily sat at her kitchen table, her father's face hard as stone. She kept glancing at the clock, her heart sinking each time it ticked past another minute. "He's not coming, is he?" Mr. Carter finally said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut like a knife. Emily swallowed hard, her throat dry. Maybe something came up. But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. Ethan wasn't coming. And for the first time since she found out she was pregnant, she felt completely alone. The morning light slipped through the thin motel curtains, waking Ethan from a restless sleep. His dreams had been scattered flashes of Emily crying, the sound of a baby's faint cry, his truck speeding down an endless road. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. The air smelled faintly of old carpet and stale coffee from the lobby downstairs. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand. 5 missed calls. All from Emily. He didn't open the messages. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed, his elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. The decision he had made last night didn't feel as freeing now. It felt heavy. Still, the thought of turning around and going back made his chest tighten. By noon, he checked out of the motel. He stopped at a diner down the road and ordered black coffee and scrambled eggs. The waitress, a woman in her 40s with tired eyes, asked where he was headed. Ethan shrugged. "Just driving." She gave him a knowing look, but didn't ask more. After breakfast, he filled his truck with gas and kept driving, not caring much where he ended up. Every mile that passed between him and Milford felt like a mix of relief and shame. He told himself he just needed a little time to figure things out, but deep down, he was avoiding the truth. Meanwhile, back in Milford, Emily sat in her bedroom with her knees pulled up to her chest. The house felt colder without Ethan. She had been staring at her phone for hours, willing him to call or text. Her mom knocked softly on the door before stepping in. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about this." Emily's eyes were red from crying. "He didn't even show up, Mom. He promised me he'd be here." Her mother sighed and sat beside her on the bed. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not upset. But right now, you need to focus on yourself and the baby." Emily swallowed hard. "What if he never comes back?" Her mom hesitated before answering. "Then we'll figure it out. You're not alone, Emily. You still have us." But Emily felt alone. Completely. She thought back to all the nights she and Ethan had talked about their future, how they'd get a small apartment, maybe travel together before settling down. Now those dreams were crumbling, and she was left holding something much heavier than she'd ever imagined. That evening, Mr. Carter came home from work. He didn't say much to Emily, but she could feel his disappointment in the way he moved around the house, slamming the fridge door shut, dropping his keys onto the counter. "Has he called?" he asked finally. "No," Emily said softly. Her father's jaw tightened. "Then you need to stop waiting for him. He made his choice." Emily didn't reply, but his words pierced her. She still wanted to believe Ethan would come back. Ethan spent the next few days drifting from town to town. He slept in cheap motels or in his truck when he didn't feel like spending money. He ate at roadside diners, avoiding eye contact with strangers. One night, while parked behind a gas station, he pulled out his phone and finally opened Emily's messages. "Where are you? Ethan, please don't do this. I need you. I can't do this alone." He read them all, his stomach twisting with guilt. He typed out a reply something like, "I'm sorry, I just need time," but he deleted it before hitting send. He couldn't face her yet. A week passed. Then, 2. Emily stopped calling as much, though she still sent messages every few days. Her words had changed from desperate to cold. "If you're not coming back, just say it." Ethan stared at that last message for a long time. He didn't respond. One night, as he lay in his truck in a Walmart parking lot, he thought about his own father, a man who had walked out when Ethan was 5 and never came back. He remembered how his mother had struggled, working double shifts, and how Ethan had promised himself he'd never be like that. And yet here he was. The realization hit him hard, but it wasn't enough to make him turn the truck around. In Milford, Emily's pregnancy began to show. She wore loose sweaters to hide it, but the whispers had already started. At the cafe where she worked, 2 regular customers stopped talking the moment she walked past. At the grocery store, Mrs. Lewis from down the street asked, "And how's Ethan doing these days?" in a tone that was more judgment than curiosity. Emily learned to fake a smile and change the subject. But inside, she was breaking. Every day, without Ethan, felt like another confirmation that he was gone for good. One evening, after closing the cafe, she walked home under the dim streetlights. Her phone buzzed. It was her best friend, Claire. You can't keep waiting for him," Claire said gently. "You need to focus on what's next." Emily's voice cracked. "I know, but I can't stop thinking about what we were supposed to have." Claire was quiet for a moment. "Maybe what you were supposed to have isn't what you're going to have, but that doesn't mean it can't still be good." Emily didn't answer, but the words stayed with her. One rainy night, Ethan stopped at a small-town bar. He sat in the corner nursing a beer, trying not to think about Milford. But the TV above the bar was playing a commercial for a baby product, smiling parents holding their newborn. It felt like a punch to the gut. He left the bar early and sat in his truck in the parking lot, the rain pounding on the roof. His phone was in his hand again, Emily's number on the screen. His thumb hovered over the call button, but he couldn't press it. Instead, he started the engine and drove deeper into the night. Somewhere, deep down, Ethan knew he couldn't run forever. But he wasn't ready to stop yet. By the time autumn came, Milford's trees had turned shades of red and gold. The air carried a chill, and the smell of wood smoke drifted from chimneys. Emily was now 7 months pregnant, her belly full and heavy, making even short walks feel exhausting. She had stopped working at the cafe 2 weeks earlier. Standing all day had become too much, and the manager, though sympathetic, needed someone who could handle the pace. Emily didn't argue. She knew her body needed rest. But the days at home were long and quiet. Her mother tried to keep her company, and her father, though still distant, had softened slightly. He would sometimes bring her tea in the evenings, though he never mentioned Ethan by name. Emily hadn't heard from Ethan in almost 2 months. The last message she sent him was short. "The baby's moving now. You'd love it." He never replied. Still, she talked to the baby sometimes, lying on her bed with her hand on her stomach. "It's just you and me for now," she whispered. "But that's okay. I'm not going to leave you." She was scared, terrified, even, but She was starting to realize something important. She was stronger than she thought. Ethan, meanwhile, was running out of excuses. And money. The savings he'd brought with him were nearly gone. The motels were too expensive, so he started sleeping in his truck more often, parked behind gas stations or in rest areas. He picked up odd jobs helping load boxes at a warehouse for cash, doing oil changes at a small-town garage. But no matter where he went, he couldn't escape the thoughts in his head. Every time he saw a young couple, every time he heard a baby cry, his mind flashed back to Emily's porch that night, the fear in her eyes, the word pregnant on that little stick. One cold evening, as he was leaving a grocery store in a town 2 hours from Milford, he heard someone call his name. Ethan? He turned and froze. Standing near the entrance was Mike, one of his old friends from high school. Mike had always been the loud, outgoing type, never one to keep secrets. "Man, I thought that was you," Mike said, walking over with a grin. But his expression shifted when he got closer. "You look rough. What's going on?" Ethan forced a smile. "Just been moving around. Needed a change of scenery." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Emily's looking for you, you know. Everyone in town knows she's pregnant. People are saying you took off." The words hit like a slap. Ethan shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Things got complicated." Mike didn't buy it. "Complicated? Dude, you're gonna be a dad. You can't just disappear." Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's not that simple." Mike shook his head. "It's exactly that simple. Either you're in or you're out. And right now, you're making yourself the villain in her story." Ethan didn't respond. He just muttered a quick goodbye and walked to his truck. But the word stuck with him long after he drove away. In Milford, Emily's baby shower came and went. Her mother and a few close friends decorated the living room with pastel balloons and a banner that read "Welcome." Little one gifts were piled on the table, tiny clothes, blankets, bottles. Emily smiled for the pictures, but there was an empty space in her heart where Ethan should have been. Claire noticed and slipped her a note in the middle of the party. "You don't need him to do this. You've got this." Emily folded the note and kept it in her nightstand. A week later, Ethan woke up in his truck to the sound of his phone buzzing. He almost ignored it until he saw the name on the screen. Emily. His chest tightened as he answered. "Hello." For a moment, there was only the sound of her breathing. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm due in 6 weeks, Ethan." He swallowed hard. "I know. You don't know anything," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "You haven't been here. You haven't seen what this is like. I just thought you should know. I'm not waiting for you anymore." Ethan gripped the phone. "Emily, No," she cut in. "Don't say anything. If you're going to be in this baby's life, you need to decide now. If not, stay gone." And then the line went dead. Ethan sat there, the silence in the truck deafening. For the first time since he left, he felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff. One step would take him back to Milford, and the other would make his absence permanent. The following days were restless. He couldn't focus on work, couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Emily holding their baby without him there. One night, he drove for hours with no destination, the dark highway stretching endlessly ahead. And somewhere deep inside, a truth began to grow. He couldn't run forever. The walls were closing in, and soon, he would have to choose. The first snowfall of the year came early in Milford. White flakes drifted down, covering rooftops, sidewalks, and the bare branches of the trees. Emily sat by her bedroom window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the world turn quiet and cold. Her due date was just 2 weeks away, but the baby seemed eager. That morning, she felt the first real contractions. At first, they were light, more like a tightening in her belly than pain. But by late afternoon, they came sharper, stronger, and closer together. Her mom noticed her wincing as she tried to get up from the couch. "Emily, I think it's time." Emily's heart raced. She grabbed the bag she had packed weeks ago and followed her parents to the car. As they drove through the snowy streets, she stared out the window, thinking of Ethan. She had told herself she was done waiting, but part of her still wished he'd walk through the hospital doors and stand beside her. Ethan was 2 towns over, working in the back of a small repair shop, when his phone buzzed. The message was from Claire. "Emily's in labor." He froze. His hands, stained with grease, tightened around the phone. The words seemed to echo in his head. "Emily's in labor." He pictured her lying in a hospital bed, gripping her mother's hand, her face tense with pain. He pictured his baby entering the world, without him there to see it. He set the wrench down, his chest pounding. This was it. This was the moment he either stayed gone forever or went back and faced everything he'd been afraid of. For a long minute, he just stood there, the noise of the shop fading into the background. Then, without another thought, he pulled off his work gloves, grabbed his jacket, and walked out. The drive to Milford felt like it took forever. The snow was falling heavier now, blanketing the roads, making his tires slip on the curves. But he didn't slow down. When he pulled into the hospital parking lot, his hands were shaking. He hadn't been here since his grandmother's illness years ago. The building looked the same, tall, sterile, and a little too quiet. Inside, the smell of disinfectant hit him. He walked up to the front desk, his voice unsteady. "Emily Carter, she's having a baby." The nurse looked up, scanning her computer. "Room 214, but..." Ethan didn't wait for her to finish. He followed the signs, his boots squeaking on the polished floor. When he reached the door, he paused. He could hear muffled voices inside: Emily's mother, a nurse, and Emily herself, her voice strained from the contractions. His hand hovered over the handle, fear rushing back into him. What if she told him to leave? What if she didn't even want him there? But before he could decide, the door opened. Emily's mother stepped out, surprised to see him. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then she said quietly, "She's in there. You'd better make it count." Ethan stepped into the room. Emily was lying back against the pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but determined. She looked at him, and for a second, her expression was unreadable. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice hoarse. I couldn't stay away," he said. "I'm sorry, Emily. I was scared, but I shouldn't have left. I want to be here now. I want to be here for both of you." She didn't answer right away. Another contraction hit, and she squeezed the bed rails, breathing through the pain. Ethan stepped closer, hesitating before taking her hand. She didn't pull away. Hours passed in a blur of nurses coming and going, beeping monitors, and Emily's soft cries as the contractions grew stronger. Ethan stayed by her side, holding her hand, wiping her forehead with a damp cloth, whispering, "You've got this, Em. You're doing amazing." When the moment finally came, the room filled with urgency and motion. Emily gritted her teeth, pushing with all her strength. Ethan could only watch, his chest aching with both fear and awe. And then the cry, a tiny, sharp sound that cut through the air. The nurse lifted the newborn, red-faced and wriggling, and laid the baby on Emily's chest. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at the little face. Ethan felt something inside him shift, something deep and permanent. He reached out, his hand trembling, and touched the baby's tiny fingers. They curled around his. "She's beautiful," he whispered. Emily looked up at him, her expression softer now. "She?" Ethan smiled through the tears he didn't realize were falling.
"Yeah, she."
For a moment, the three of them stayed like that, Emily cradling the baby, Ethan beside her, the world outside the hospital forgotten. Later that night, when the room was quiet and Emily was resting, Ethan sat in the chair beside her bed, holding his daughter for the first time. She was so small, so fragile, yet somehow she felt like the most important thing he'd ever held. He thought about the months he had spent running, how far he'd gone just to avoid this moment. And now that it was here, he couldn't imagine being anywhere else. He leaned down, whispering to the sleeping baby, "I'm not going anywhere again. I promise." Emily stirred, opening her eyes. "Do you mean that?" Ethan looked at her and nodded.
"Yeah,
"I mean it." And for the first time in months, Emily believed him. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering Milford in white. Inside, in that small hospital room, a new chapter had begun. Not perfect, not easy, but theirs.